Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today is the 27th of October. Now this day has a very important significance, and that is about, as we mark it as a black day. 27th October 1947 was the day when the Indian forces illegally occupied the state of Jammu and Kashmir. That was the time when their forces landed there and they just went after the population out there, and by force they controlled the area. And even till date, if you look at the number, I was surprised to get to know yesterday, in fact, that the number is not only 900,000. The number of active paramilitary forces from the army, from the military of India, that is around 900,000. Then on top, 350,000 special groups who are there to look after the affairs, and then around 150,000 active police members. So you can well imagine that for every 7 Kashmiris, there is a one soldier or a man in uniform and a trigger-happy person. When you compare the same number when the COVID was there and everybody was forced to be in a lockdown, remember that for one single ventilator was for 70,000 Kashmiris. You can well imagine the kind of interest the Indian state has there. When you talk about the atrocities that are being going on, you name it, and that's there. I think they are practicing the methods how to torture human beings. Whether you talk about the elderly, you talk about women, you talk about children, you talk about youth, look at the level of this pellet gun use. I mean, firing straight on your face, imagine that, and you have been blinded forever. This is a regular feature out there. You talk about just leaving mad dogs on these streets so that people may not come out. That's another tactic. Forget about the load shedding of electricity or gas or certain other shortages which they create just to make sure that the people, the Muslims living in Kashmir, should be sort of squeezed in one way or the other. Well, that's a long story. I can go on forever. But today, again, the Prime Minister, in fact, observed the Kashmir Black Day and also gave a very strong statement. He said that we will vow to continue supporting Kashmiri struggle for the right of self-determination, since it's an indigenous homegrown movement, and we not only support them politically or morally or diplomatically, but also in every form which is to be required. Now, to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right is Commodore retired Basit Raza Bhai Saab, who's a senior analyst. Sir, thank you very much for your time. And we have with us Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi Saiba, a former diplomat. Ma'am, thank you very much for your time as well. And we have with us Dr. Waleed Rasool Saab, who's a senior Kashmiri leader. Thank you very much, Waleed Saab, for your time as well. Now, Bhai Saab, let's start off from you, sir. 27th of October is a black day, and we observe it every year just to remember what happened in 1947 on the same date. The Indian forces illegally occupied the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and ever since then, since the number is so huge, they are trying to suppress this freedom struggle that's been going on for almost 70 plus years. More than 100,000 Kashmiris have laid down their lives. God knows what's the number of injured people. How many people have been orphaned? How many women have been widowed? Nobody knows. How many people have been kidnapped? And then you talk about the mass graveyards and so on and so forth. State terrorism at its optimum level, sir. Your take. Let's start from there.
You rightly narrated all the atrocities that the Indians have been committing. And this all started, this series of atrocities started from this date, which is observed as a Black Day. And as the history is that the Maharaja signed a sign of accession agreement, and then the Indian forces entered there, and they celebrate it as a holiday, and the Kashmiris and all of us and the people with conscience observed it as a Black Day. So this is what is surprising is that all these state-sponsored terrorism, you narrated it very well, all this has not been able to break the will of Kashmiris. Their struggle goes unabated. The world conscience is sleeping, and Pakistan has been creating all the noise. We have been knocking at every door, and we are trying to highlight the state of Kashmir and the atrocities committed by the Indian government. But unfortunately, the economic interests of the world dominate, and they are unable to sort of take cognizance of the situation. And even if they are cognizant, they are not able to take any action. And this is a very unfortunate happening, and I hope that the struggles of Pakistan and are able to sort of, we were able to take the case to the Security Council with the help of Chinese. And all these things, if you see that even this abrogation of Article 370 and all these, this is a series which is falling one after another, and there is no ending in sight. And if I were to point out one reason for that, why India is allowed to do all that, is because of United States total support on the premise that India would stand against China.
Even as we speak, sir, the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, and the Secretary of the State, Mr. Mike Pompeo, they are in India having a very
Faisal,
high-level meeting there.
if you allow me to delve on it for a minute, this is 2+2 meeting where the Secretary of State and the Defense Secretary, they meet their counterparts.
It's very
India.
rare to see these two
It's very
gentlemen
rare
together
because
visiting one
even
country.
one of them is so big for
And especially,
any
sir,
country.
about 10 days prior to the American election.
Exactly.
So what was the hurry? I mean, let's talk about that also.
Yes, actually this is a very, very important agreement that they have already signed. The meeting is in progress, but there is a basic exchange and cooperation agreement, what is known as BECA. This is sharing of satellite information, very, very sensitive satellite information, and that actually is vital for anti-missile and to fight the missiles and the armed drones. And it has topographical, aeronautical information, and which is which with if your aircraft is not equipped, you don't have this information, you cannot have advanced avionics in your aircraft. So now that this agreement is in place, United States will bestow the most advanced navigation and avionics to the aircraft provided to India. You must be aware that India has acquired $21 billion worth of US arms since 2007 when their relationship started. And now in the backdrop of all this 2+2 meeting is taking place, and Mike Pompeo's agenda is that from India he will go to Sri Lanka and Maldives. These are the countries where China is also sort of trying to
have its own influence. Yes,
exactly. So this is a countermeasure, and in the backdrop of all this, next month there is going to be a naval exercise of what is called Quad, the 4 countries: Australia, India, United States and Japan.
Yeah,
they are going to have, these are the moves which are sort of trying to sort of intimidate China and to sort of show that
primarily when we talk about encircling China, this is exactly what is happening. Now, I'm moving on to you now. A couple of questions, since you have served as a very senior diplomat. Ma'am, whenever we talk about the Kashmir issue, there are 3 words, very pertinent and very important and very often used: diplomatic support for the Kashmir cause, moral support for the Kashmir cause, and political support for the Kashmir cause. Now, ma'am, very straight question: are these 3 areas very important, or do you really believe that now, since this is 2020, game has changed, Indian alliance has changed, and as Commodore Sab just mentioned, the kind of equipment, intelligence sharing you're talking about so much more going on. So that is going to give a lot of strength to the Indians. So don't you think, ma'am, in order to liberate Kashmir in any way, these 3 supports wouldn't be enough? Your take, ma'am.
Well, I would slightly disagree with you, because what you're implying is that we should give more material support, maybe.
Maybe not, because a lot of analysts do believe that this is the time that one should do that. But unfortunately,
but then I believe that Pakistan's policy has been very considered, and I think it's a very wise policy. because when you start involving yourself in a movement like this, which is indigenous, which is there on the right side of history, on the right side of morality, then when another country starts to assist in a more material
Pragmatic way,
way,
yeah.
pragmatic way, then you actually undermine the movement itself. And why would you want to do that? Because our entire stand has been that this, a plebiscite should be held as promised to them by the international community, and this was a case that was taken to the United Nations by India and not by Pakistan. And the international community must now take onus of their decision and hold that plebiscite, and not keep a blind eye on what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir. You know, your heart wrenches at the very thought of what suffering the poor Kashmiris have been bearing for the last 73 years. And as you said, I'm a diplomat. I have served abroad, and I was 5 years ambassador to the EU, and it really makes me sort of mad to see how what double standards sometimes the Western countries.
So morality doesn't
imply.
exist in
It
today's
doesn't-
world, right?
It doesn't exist, because when it comes, for example, when it comes to East Timor, for example, when it comes to South Sudan, then immediately the international community responds. Why
Christians.
do they not support in the same way the Palestinians or the Kashmiris? Why? Because we are Muslims. Simple. So there are double standards and a lot of politics going on. Beyond that, because Palestine is also
primarily
in
because
a very strategic location.
those issues were inside Muslim strongholds, whether you talk about Sudan or you talk about Indonesia, and the issue was primarily concerning the Christians.
Yeah.
So they were sorted out. Over here,
it's the Muslims.
whether you talk about the Palestinian issues, Muslim land occupied by another state,
yeah.
and they're expanding constantly. Same the case is with Kashmir.
But both the areas, if you look at their geostrategic location, it is extremely important for the West. So because of political and strategic and economic considerations, they find it very convenient to close their eyes. They even forget that India was very conveniently lodged in the Soviet bloc before the demise of Soviet Union, and they were not in the Western bloc at all. And now they have become the darlings of the West, because not only because
Then hats off to their foreign policy, ma'am.
I think more than that, it is the fear of the rise of China, because the rise of China is no great brainer. We've been talking for centuries now that China would rise. So it's nothing, it's not new news that China has risen, but I think it is the speed and the scale of the rise of China which is becoming very problematic for the world, because of advancement in technology. I think the rise of China to this extent was not expected by the West so quickly. With the result, I think it's a lot of panic
I think the strength of
maneuvering
the
that is
Chinese,
going
it
out.
was underestimated for various reasons. And I mean, whether you talk about their currency, their influence, their investment, the kind of capabilities they have acquired over a period of time, the kind of technology they have produced. I mean, hats off to them. Now, one important area, so when we talk about Kashmir, obviously you talk about the core valley, and then you talk about the other side, you talk about Ladakh also. Since the abrogation of Article 370 on the 5th of August 2019 and Article 35A, I mean, the special status have been taken away, and a lot on ground is changing as we speak. Within a year, look at the demographic changes that have occurred. Look at the kind of military might that's exercising the papar out there. And you talk about the homegrown indigenous struggle. I mean, that's been maligned, and those freedom fighters, they've been associated with the terrorists now. Now, that is something which the Western world really buys. terrorist activity, somebody with a black marker on their face or certain look of that sort, would make you think that that person T is from T for terrorist, as they say. That is very, very unfortunate, sir. Let's start off from that part.
Actually, in Kashmir context, it is not first time that she had applied the policy of agenda setting. She did it in 1947. The freedom fighters were called the raiders, and the international media took the same narrative. And again in 1965, they were called infiltrators, and India invested on the media, and same narrative was carried by foreign powers in the foreign media. Now you are tagging them, first the mercenaries and then the terrorists. If you look it empirically, the terrorist term in the empirical science is one man is freedom fighter and another man is terrorist. If same definition prevails, what was the Chandra Bose, what was the Bhagat Singh, what was the Mangal Pandey? He was a terrorist in terms of British, and but they were the great freedom fighters for the India. It is not our problem. It is the problem of the India that they want to give it the bad name and to kill it. We don't have this issue. But our issue is that since there are two respectable and honorable diplomats, in diplomacy we need liver to bargain, and in international relations you need interest. These are the core things you need. Now issue rises here that you have the diplomats, the Pakistan. We have to understand that in international arena, it is the state actor which has access to UN mechanism, to EU, to other international organizations. It is not me. My work is to sustain and to continue my struggle despite of the huge cost, at the cost of red hot blood. And my people, particularly the current people in the post 5th August situation, it is not only the terrorism in one respect. It is a demographic terrorism, it is an economic terrorism, it is the terrorism on the social basis, it is naked terrorism by Indian armed forces. As you were quoting the quantitative data of the ratio, so in the social sciences or in conflict sciences, you remove from to quantify the small children, the sick people and the women. Then you draw the ratio between the occupational forces and the civilian. It becomes, sir, 1:3, and you know that the area of Kashmir is 112 kilometers in length and 85 kilometers in breadth. And you can imagine that when there are more than 1 million, more than 1.5 million armed forces, what will be the situation? So I think what is my people's part, particularly my entire leadership, the elite, our top leadership, Yasin Malik, Nahid Nasreen, Dr. Faktu, Shibir Ahmad Shah and other, Muhammad Sumir, Masrat Alam, they are all in the Tihar jail. Okay. What they did not did,
and the remaining are under house arrest.
They have left, but they failed to kill our sentiment. Now your question should be, what is our gain? So our gain is that we have transferred our movement to our 5th generation. We call generation.
And all these generations, are they on the same page now? I mean, let's talk about Burhan Wani for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, what a hero, what a brilliant, brave man he was. Strong enough to send a message across. Is it true that there are sort of differences within the ranks of the political parties of Kashmir?
Actually, recently I developed a peer-reviewed paper published by Policy and Foreign Policy Journal, Peace and Policy. We and my team we interviewed 720 people from Indian occupied Kashmir. Then we brought 23 journalists abroad in Turkey to test our hypothesis. That is, and it was really ironic for me that they are more resilient than me, despite I am in cozy environment, safe in Pakistan, and they are more determined. And as far as you are talking about that there are some sort of, you need to go 3 books. One is written by Aaron Koch, the first Raw Chief, and second is by Ajit Doval Vajpayee, and third is by B.N. Sood, the Unending Wars. They were all these Raw Chiefs, and present Security Council dual. So their budget, which is recently published by Stockholm Peace Institute, their current budget is $771 billion, and she replaced Saudi Arabia. And you know our army budget is only $12 billion. So she is investing more than $10 billion on the intelligence. And this is not, there are only 2 actors. Faisal, there are only 2 actors. One is collaborator, one is freedom fighter. And one who is collaborator is anti-status quo in terms of a scholar who watches my conflict closely, because I am myself a sample, an oscillating sample of my conflict, and another who want to shake the status quo. So I have no this problem if they have any sort of internal rift on the basis of the group, but their goal post is the same. That they should be liberated from the clutches of the India. Now again, one question which I want to convey: by these prestigious organization, Pakistan is paying the huge cost for it. Today the bomb blast in the
Kohart Road, yeah.
This timing matters. Earlier when 5th August event, they decided to scrap Article 370, they also carried a bomb blast in the Karachi, and so in the war context, this is an asymmetrical and it is a warfare where the role of the civil society and we people is more that we have to maintain in our internal security by keeping an eye to our people who want to disturb my peace.
All right. Now, Air Commander Saab, when we talk about the Indian sponsored terrorism, I mean, the visuals are there, the still footages are there, and you can see what's going on. Interestingly, sir, over a period of time, the Indians were able to really squeeze the Russians and get the best out of them, militarily or otherwise. They had great relationship with countries like Germany, France, or Britain for that matter, maybe primarily because of the economic reasons and the kind of trade. I was surprised to know that the Rafale jets flew from France and landed in UAE, refilled, and then, so obviously we can't blame UAE, being a Muslim country, they should shy away from India. No sir, it doesn't work like that anymore. Sure. The bilateral trade between India and UAE is $60 billion, third biggest trading partner after EU and USA, just after USA and China. So just imagine, UAE, such a small country, $30 billion of import and $30 billion of export. Makes sense then. So primarily, sir, as earlier we were talking about, that morality doesn't exist anymore, it's the economic interest. Our biggest problem currently is economics, sir, and we are suffering on almost a daily basis, and we're trying to struggle. Whereas when you talk about India, we do understand, sir, they have a huge, kind of a deficit when it comes to trade. Because of Corona primarily, they were not able to manage it so well. But sir, looking at the kind of support now they're getting from countries like Japan, I mean, you talked about Quad, Australia, Japan, and
India,
America,
US.
And
I mean,
USA, obviously, USA, Japan, Australia, and now and India. Now, at the same time, sir, when we talk about isolation of China and emergence of India, it seems that those powers really want India to come up. I mean, forget about the Kashmir issue. forget about Ladakh. I mean, you should concentrate more on the South China Sea. I mean, that's how they would try to put pressure on China and on other supporting countries for that matter, sir. Whether it's the issue of Taiwan or Vietnam or other smaller countries all along the eastern side of China, sir.
So, if you are taking the geostrategic perspective, China was almost a landlocked country from its west. It's only the eastern flank was open to the sea, South China Sea, and the Indian Ocean and all those areas were invested by US Navy. So, they could, whenever wanted, they could actually interdict China, and they could
Strait of
stop.
Malacca was their
Right.
weakness primarily, yeah.
And then came the CPEC, which gave a lifeline through the west and through Gwadar. So, this change is perhaps is the most disturbing, and many of these machinations that you see now are to sort of disturb that, and some other trying that this should not happen. But Chinese are sure footed, and inshallah this will progress as planned. So, this is what is bothering them, and this is why the emphasis and the focus is more and more shifting onto India, because they want that somehow.
So, the Indian-American alliance is going to be for the maybe next 5 decades or maybe more.
Exactly. You know, it is at peak now because of the racist policies of the present incumbent US president, and which is acknowledged and sort of by the Democrats, and they are sort of making a huge hue and cry about it. So, whatever happens in America has ripples all over the world. So, then Trump took that stance that those rightist movements flourished all over the world, and mostly in India. I mean, they got a sort of field day by this man and President of United States. So, this is what is happening. I don't think this will change too drastically if there is a change of captaincy of the presidency. But under the Trump presidency, India is actually free to do whatever they want, so long as they keep backing America in its attempts to sort of contain China. And you must have noticed, this is very obvious, that China is aware that they have to sort of do something about so they are increasing their naval strength. That is one thing. And second, you see the Malacca Strait and those choke points, they have planned to sort of cut a tunnel through the Thailand so that they can sort of bypass that choke point, Malacca Strait and all that. So, all these things bring the CPEC into focus, because this is the flagship project, and rest of the BRI projects, this is the linchpin. And this is what is happening, all these military exercises and all these advanced military equipment to India, it is going only for that eventuality when something will be done against China. But I don't think Indians have the feet and courage to take that onslaught. They are playing a game, sort of trying to convince the Americans that yes, in the time of need we will stand against China. But we have seen what happened in Ladakh and all these Pangong Tso and all those areas. I mean, it was a very small skirmish, no doubt, but it shows your mindset. It shows how you tackle the things. And very surprisingly, initially Mr. Modi actually didn't admit that something drastic has happened. He said that
he said that we haven't lost any land.
You know,
so if he hasn't lost any land, so what's the problem
why
then?
is the hullabaloo about it? So this is what is happening. And the second thing, India was a rising India for many years. Not now. Its
Stalling
GDP
India.
is falling.
Indian,
but the
rising India,
India.
shining India.
Shining India, all those rise and shine.
India
is
on a
gone.
move.
It's history. So the economic decline of India, which is quite obvious, it was there before COVID, it has been multiplied during COVID, and all these things, you know, Faisal, any statesman understands that if you are running a country, you have to take everybody together. But if everybody is moving in different direction, how can the country progress? And look at
This is what
leader.
Modi needs to think. I mean, this is what he has done.
This
He's
is what
created
I'm
so many
surprised
differences
that-
within various ranks. And on top, sir, when we talk about Sikhs living in India, or you talk about Muslims living in India, they make up a good chunk of, I mean, the total number of
200
Muslims.
million Muslims.
Exactly. So, and the Dalits and the
Dalits
other non-Hindus, let's put it this way. Ma'am, one thing which really, you know, makes me think, and that is about the statement, whether coming from the Prime Minister or otherwise, that, you know, we will keep supporting Kashmir, good enough. And then they also believe that the global community should be calling the shots, and they should, you know, put some pressure on India. And as we earlier talked, that morality doesn't exist in today's world. It's the economic power which does. Now, I'm looking at the current situation where the alignments have changed, where the, you know, you can see the direction of various countries, and then the conflict of Kashmir, where there are 4 stakeholders now. It's not only Pakistan and India and Kashmir, it's the Chinese also as well. Ma'am, under these given circumstances, do you think that in the coming days, maybe next 5 years, or maybe next 10 years, let's a decade from now, things would be different, or same would be happening, ma'am? Instead of 1.5, there would be 2.0 million military forces there, or maybe there would be more demographic changes by then, or I mean, anything can happen.
Well, to begin with, I would like to carry on from where he left, and that is, you know, he's very right when he said that tackling China is not that easy for India, because if you look at the figures, whether it is the military capability,
Despite the support of the West, ma'am, the French, the
despite
Germans,
the support
the
of the
British,
West.
the Americans.
I am just returning from China. I was the ambassador there till August. I've just returned. In my understanding, I think the Chinese are very clear in their mind that India is not a threat to them. They can tackle India at any time if they so desire. Now, whether they want to start that confrontation at this time is another story. I personally
In
feel they would not.
1962, the actual ratio of the military was 1 to 2 with the Chinese. Now it's 1 to 7.
And it's not only the personnel, it's the technology, it's the advancements because of the extreme reforms that China has undertaken of the PLA armed forces. They are really on top of their game. And India is nowhere close to the capability of the Chinese at this particular point in time. Similarly, in terms of their economic strength, they may wish to think that they can challenge China or they can rival China, but the figures don't match at all. So I think it's just the West is trying to prep up India to be a contender for China, but I do not see that happening, not in the next 30, 40 years, because
Not 30, 40 years.
no, not because China is far ahead of them, even in technology. The gap is so much, and with everything that is
And
going
despite
on
the
in
support
India,
from the West,
despite the support from the West, because the support can only go thus far. Look at what is happening in India, demographically, politically, socially. It is actually coming apart. Their society is disintegrating. Their secularism has completely failed. So
diminished. It doesn't
diminished,
exist
it
anymore.
doesn't exist. So it is not only that the West will give them money or the West will give them equipment. You need the soul of a nation to be together, like the Akamoto said. But the soul of the Indian state is not together. It's divided now, and they've gone back so much. They've been left behind by China to such a degree that for them to leapfrog and catch up with China in the next 5-10 years, I don't see that happening.
Task.
It is an impossible task. And I also feel that both the Indians and the Americans, I could be totally wrong, both the Indians and the Americans are actually fooling each other, basically, because India, they feel that when the time comes, India might stand up to them, but the West also knows that this is not the China of 1960s, it's not the China of the 1970s or 80s, this is the China of 2020, which is in technology, in 5G only, about 4 to 5 years ahead of the US. In AI, there's no comparison.
Is it true, ma'am, regarding the artificial intelligence, they are ahead
They are
of
ahead.
Silicon Valley? Is it true?
The Americans themselves admit. Some people say that the Chinese are 10 years ahead, but the Chinese are very pragmatic people. They themselves say that the Americans are about between 2 to 4 years behind. Now that in technology terms is a very huge time gap.
Yes, yes.
So as I said in the beginning, it is not the rise of China which is a brainer. It is the strength of the rise and the speed of the rise and the strength of the rise which is actually
So there are pros and cons and now
and one more thing that
yes,
I
ma'am,
would
please,
like
please,
to say,
please.
which I think politically is very important to understand, that if you look at China and if you follow their leadership and their speeches and their statements, you would see that China does not talk in absolute terms. They are very measured.
Defined.
They're very refined, they're very polite, but they're very sure-footed. But in recent years,
ma'am, there was a
if you look-
statement from the Chinese regarding the Indians, especially regarding this abrogation of 370.
that is what I am trying to tell you.
Yeah, they said that
if you-
whosoever is going to fire the first. Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
That is what I am trying to point out, that if you look at the statements of the Chinese leaders in the last 1 year, especially since the 70th anniversary of their independence last year, it has dramatically changed. You see a very strong China, very confident China, and basically challenging and changing their rhetoric. You had never heard China say that if need be, we will defend it to our last soul. You had never seen China saying that we will not fight our battles on the west, on other shores. We will fight on our own land. You'd never seen China make such strong statements on Taiwan and warning almost the Americans to be aware. So now the West is also knows that going for an all-out war with China is
Not a joke. All right.
it's not a joke.
All right.
If anybody thinks that America will move to occupy Taiwan, is living in a fool's paradise. I don't
No
think
matter what
the
sort of
West is-
support they give to the Taiwanese, I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Reality
but
is
the reality
very different on ground. Yeah.
Today, if a move is made from the West in any way to occupy or for them to declare independence or whatever, it's a matter of 3 to 4 days for the Chinese to occupy the island. It's very
It is
clear.
that
They
simple.
have the capability,
Yeah.
and they have said so. And similarly, if they think that they can take away Tibet or take away Hong Kong from them, then they're living in a
All
totally
right.
fool's
No,
paradise.
Dr. Walid, now, since the rise of China in the region, that also tells us one thing, that the Kashmir cause will be taken care of at some stage. Because when you have such a strong player, a neighboring player, I would say, sir, things could be different. Because when it comes to Pakistan, sir, reality is very different. No matter what sort of a statement we issue that we totally support them, yes, we do. But, sir, we are limited in our own resources also. We can't allocate everything, and this is a reality. A lot of people believe that maybe if things remain the way they are, this is going to put more pressure on India. Look at the number of forces they have deployed there. Even on the Chinese side now, I mean, that is causing them a lot of problem.
India doesn't have the capability of
Let's see
fighting
what
on two
happens
fronts.
after this
It is
winter.
not possible.
So now, do you believe that the sort of engagement of the Chinese in this particular area would ease things for the Kashmiris?
Actually, it is very interesting why Madam left. Since I am an international relations student and they are seasoned diplomats and having a top-notch experience in practicing the diplomacy, because it is my requirement to search some sort of refuge that where I will get exit. Recently I developed a paper, China and its relations with neighbors and Kashmir cause. So my argument is
China, its
neighbors-
relations with the neighbors,
Neighbors
and
and
cause.
Kashmir
Exactly
cause.
the same point I want you to throw light on, yeah?
Yeah, it is, I send it to Institute of Strategic Studies for the publication. Actually, in international relations, we were affiliated with USA, CETO,
CENTO, yeah.
war against communism, war against terrorism, and it helped a lot Americans, and that was an interest. In international relations, this was an interest. But we failed to keep Kashmir at priority.
And why was that
even
so?
not even
Doctor?
simultaneously, we didn't run it simultaneously. Now, what is my worry, which I want to make the point, and same is my paper. My worry is definitely when you are digging deep empirically, putting my data in an empirical prism, we say it law of interdependence in post-globalization and post-modernization era. But what law of interdependence says? You will help me only when you are also dependent on me. Okay? America was helping you because,
Or maybe there is some
because
common
she was a
interest, yeah.
requirement. She was having your requirement, but she was not at your geographia.
Okay.
Her geographia was aligned. So this is a more one connecting thread with the Kashmir cause to the China. Now, what is an interesting? Interesting is that there are 7 reasons why I should think that China is a solution to my problem. Because in asymmetrical conflict, when there is not parity between India, Pakistan and Kashmir is together, then what I will do? I have to do empirically, I have to align with the powerful.
This is
But
exactly
why,
what is happening.
But why it did not work in context of the America? She was not having any enmity with the India.
All right.
But China is having. Number one. Number two,
Sir,
when
quick, 30
recently,
seconds, please, sir.
when recently in DOBD road, they killed 22 Indian soldiers. There is only 9 kilometers difference between DOBD road to the Khunjrab, where our forces are stationed. So we are already very close militarily. Now, number 4 is the 14th Corps, which is stationed in the Leh. That is now vulnerable. Definitely, China have gained the top positions. I'm talking in terms of militarily. China has gained the top positions, so the entire corps is now under the target. Militarily, it supports.
They've
me.
also shown
now
their vulnerabilities in that area.
Third factor is
They can cut
she is directly connect. There is directly enmity between China, and in proper sense, enemy is your friend.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyways,
And number fourth is that when China feels insecure due to wrong decisions of the racist Modi, what she did, as discussed already, the Quad group, it is not liked by China at any cost. And number fifth, when she runs through CPAC and she reaches to Indian Ocean, because your degree of interdependence increases. More the degree of interdependence, more is the chain gauging and buck passing we say in international
Absolutely, sir.
relations. And that is the because what is my basic problem? I have failed to solve the Kashmir because there is an asymmetry.
All right.
Asymmetry between,
Sir?
and I have to bridge. I have to solve that asymmetry.
I think that would be the way forward
and
now.
the solution is the China.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Russell. Thank you so much. Ma'am, was a pleasure having you. Sir, thank you so much for your time as well. And that's all we have for this hour. We'll continue our transmission from 9 to 10 also. We'll just take a break now. Stay with us.